we're seeing a massive change here in the establishment's idea of Israel?
It's a very difficult thing to answer because, first of all, I don't think our relationship has ever been unquestioning. I can recall during the last Israeli operation there was word out of cabinet that David Miliband, I think, had said, where does all this end? If you go way back to 1973, much of Europe actually abandoned Israel quite shamefully during that conflict. So I think there's always been a question. It's just that when it comes to the crunch, the issue is, what does the British government say about a situation which many people feel angry about and aggrieved about, but for which there is no alternative at all on the table? And this is what I think Warsi was trying to express. It's notable that she has not offered a single alternative policy. No one has, no one can. Cameron hasn't, even though he's expressed his frustration. Miliband hasn't, Clegg hasn't. The reason is very simply because Israel is defending itself. It has a legitimate right to do that. But in the course of doing that, it is unfortunately, and I believe without intending to do so, killing innocent civilians. Now, what is Britain supposed to say to Israel? Stop? In which case, is Israel really supposed to suffer all those rocket attacks? Or is it supposed to say, go ahead, which I think the public and much of the international world would regard as outrageous, especially when the UN school are being targeted and children are being killed. So I don't think it's not unquestioning. I think people want to have a discussion. The problem is no one's quite sure what to say because there really is no alternative. I think the best response is the one that's come from Welby. I try to write about this too, which is my own personal religious and Christian response, which is to say, let's stress humanitarian aid, and let's try and help them to work their way out of it, and let's pray about this. To me, just that simple sense of wanting to show compassion for a truly tragic situation is the only thing one can say right now, because there are no practical alternatives.
Can I offer one practical alternative, which is that the world, the international community, the government in this country, unites in recognising that the constant cause of these constant wars is Hamas, and that Hamas must be defeated, and that Qatar must be stopped from supporting Hamas, and that other countries in the region which support Hamas, and they are dwindling, must be stopped from supporting Hamas, and that Hamas itself must be destroyed. That is the only way to stop the 18-month to 2-year endless repetitive cycle of this conflict. It will be done not by berating Israel, not by grandstanding against Israel. It will only be done by defeating Hamas.
And I just want to say, I think everyone would agree with that if, as part of that, the economic situation of Gaza is improved. Because a lot of people recognise that Hamas is an illegitimate expression of the very difficult circumstances that Gazans find themselves in.
It's not the worst living conditions in the world, and there are far worse living conditions, far worse GDP, and so on. The problem is, I would come back to this, that in 2006 and 2007, when the world saw, having been voted in by the people of Gaza, and you could take the view that when people vote for a terrorist group, there is some culpability on them. But even if you don't take that view, and I don't particularly, you could have taken the view, and the international community did not, that once Hamas then used that post-election period to carry out a coup and to kill the Fatah opponents of theirs, and to make sure that they got the situation they now have, which is that they never have another election, that the international community could have moved in. It could have decided to intervene. It could have toppled Hamas at that point. It could have used regional leverage to get rid of Hamas. And instead, what we are seeing in each cycle of this, and we're seeing it with this, is that gradually the international community and so-called do-gooders in the West are actually taking part in the process of pushing the Palestinian cause and Palestinian needs and desires for rights into the same bucket as that of Hamas. And what this means is that we are pushing the Palestinians and Hamas into the same pot. That is, I think, a disaster, because that way you actually cannot get a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian dispute, because Israel cannot make a deal with Hamas.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a very good observation that, particularly in terms of media coverage, there's been a slow misunderstanding of the relationship between Hamas and ordinary Gazans. And I think people, through this narrative of Israel indiscriminately killing people, are indeed validating the Hamas narrative. I would turn that around slightly by saying the Israeli state does not necessarily speak for all Israelis. And conversely, much of the media gives the impression that there is universal Israeli support for what's going on, and there isn't.
But it is a very, very high majority. The approval ratings for this operation are in the 80% plus of the Israeli public, because 80% of the Israeli public are under rocket fire, and they don't like it any more than people in London would like it.